CM Punk versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Who wins in this epic dream match? What's up, guys? Welcome back to TheReviewSpace. And you know what? This is like an awesome epic match because you have two iconic characters of their respective generations. Who is the better wrestler? Who wins in a match between these two? Austin was a great character, you know. He had some flaws. I mean, it's not like I'm not gonna act like he was perfect. You know, he had some limited things in the ring, you know, especially after his injury. He lacked the mobility that he used to have after he became injured. After he broke his neck, he went from sort of a technician type of guy to a more brawler type of style, the way he would approach his matches. And so he could do limited things. He didn't have a variety of style as much as he did. If you watch Stone Cold's earlier matches, whether it's like in WCW or even early in the WWF back then, he was a lot more technical. Like, he would do suplexes, he would do certain moves that seem a lot more high risk compared to his more brawling style during the Attitude Era in his prime. That being said, I mean, this guy was amazing on the mic. He was very charismatic, a complete badass. He had this steely look in his eyes, and he looked like a serial killer. You know, he had the mustache back in the day, before he had a full-on beard. He looked like a killer. I mean, this was around like 97 when he was really starting to come into his own. I mean, he was a mid-carder at the time, an intercontinental style guy. And he feuded with guys like Brian Pillman and Bret the Hitman Hart. And those were amazing because he was coming into his own. He was becoming that badass, that anti-hero. That he'll, you know, throw the middle finger in your face and give you a stunner. And he doesn't give a crap. He doesn't care. Very, very badass character. The surly redneck character. You know, beer drinking. You know, doesn't give a crap. He would... I don't know if he ever wore a fanny pack back in the day, because I know a lot of people did in the 90s. I know The Rock did, but man, that was a long time ago. Good God. Hey, his feud with guys like The Rock too was awesome, just legendary stuff. And then obviously he went on to become WWE Champion against Shawn Michaels during WrestleMania, I believe it was 98, WrestleMania 14. Still my favorite WrestleMania of all time. And then after that, he kind of, I would say he was a little bit inconsistent. He was sort of in and out with the WWE. Like, he would be hot one time, and he'd be the champion, and then he would kind of go away. And then The Rock would take over for a bit, and then Austin would come back and feud with The Rock, and so on and so forth. 98 was definitely his best year, in terms of just achieving his goals. Stone Cold Steve Austin, 98. I mean, phenomenal year. Especially the beginning of that. You know, he fought against Kane, and then he actually lost the belt to Kane. Maybe, I mean, he should have probably kept the belt for like a year or something. I thought he was going to have a really long reign. He only held the belt for a few months. Kane beat him, you know, held the championship for one day or whatever, the pay-per-view, and then Steve Austin won it back. And that was sort of one of the early signs of the WWE Championship itself losing a bit of that luster, that prestige, where it was taken away from somebody who should have held it for a lot longer, where it was almost like there's all this build-up with Austin. Let's ride it out. Let's keep going at it. And then all of a sudden he gets halted by Kane just for that short, brief moment. Granted, he won the championship back again, but I mean, that was... The feeling around Austin was... It was incredible, especially before his championship run. He was coming into his own as a mid-carder, and he was rising up the ranks. This was around 97, late 97, early 2000, early 1998, my God. I almost said 2008. Yeah, in the 90s, Austin was phenomenal. He was the ultimate anti-hero. Because the 90s was full of anti-hero. It was full of dark characters. And this could translate into other forms of entertainment. Music, comic books, movies, and of course pro wrestling. In the music you had stuff like grunge music, which was kind of gloomy and dark. And you had rap music, gangster rap music, which was a lot more hardcore, and it was about violence and I'll shoot you in the face and gangster rap and very hardcore material, violent imagery. And then you take a look at movies. Movies in particular were getting a little bit more darker and grittier. You had movies like Quentin Tarantino's films, Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, that focused a lot on this narrative, violent structure, and very stylized, violent imagery. And then you take a look at comic books as well. Comic books was very dark. I mean, you had you had stuff like The Crow, which obviously became a dark movie as well. You had Spawn, which was one of the most iconic dark comic book characters of the 90s. He had his own film, he had his own TV show. It was very dark because it was all about this grim outlook, this kind of almost like the sense of hopelessness mixed with this very badass character that doesn't care if he, kills his opponents, and this kind of anti-hero. Pro wrestling was kind of like that. This was all, I would say, many of it, not all of it, but many of it was credited to ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, which was, of course, influenced by other factors, because of the grunge music, all these different things, this sort of media, this kind of, this consciousness in the mainstream and social structure, where you had ECW, which became a badass kind of promotion. Hardcore, violence, grittiness. It was different from his early years, like in WCW. Like, they were definitely a different character, even though he still had the skills, the talent, and all that. So, that was Austin. Austin was definitely one of the biggest icons ever. He was over like fucking crazy. Every time he came out, he got cheered like crazy. Every time he came out, huge pops. Crowd coming out of their seats. It was phenomenal. You had to be there to understand it. You had to be in that place, in that environment, where every single episode, Austin had to be seen. You had to see what the hell he was going to do next. His feud against Vince McMahon, his feud against The Rock, his feud against anybody was must-see television, because you don't know what he was going to do next. He was crazy. Now we got CM Punk. CM Punk is a different character. A lot of people like to compare the two, but in all honesty, they're really not that similar. I mean, there are certain things that are kind of the same, where you have this rebellious guy who's all about anti-establishment, and he, challenging Vince McMahon and all this stuff. It's still not the same. CM Punk feels a lot more PG than Stone Cold. Austin would flip people off, his middle finger, show it to the camera, show it on TV. He would swear, he would use words like bitch and kick your ass and son of a bitch and all this. He was very vulgar. He drank beer. Austin was a very badass character. CM Punk is straight edge. CM Punk was more about, I'm not drinking beer. It's not about that. It's not about drugs. It's all about just being the best in the world, the most talented, and I have this given talent, and I have this charisma, and I'm very focused, and I'm good on the mic, this snarky attitude. That's what CM Punk is, and as far as comparing the two characters, they're quite different, like I mentioned. I don't know, it's weird, man. People compare them all the time, and it's like, I can't even really see it that much. A little bit here and there, but not too much. CM Punk is just a different character. He's more of a modern-day, contemporary wrestler. He has, like, especially the attire. Let's begin with the tights and the clothing. I mean, Austin looked very traditional. He had the basic black trunks attire, and he had the knee pads, and he had, he sort of had a very basic look, I mean, it was very simplistic. CM Punk is a lot more modern looking. Take a look at his clothing. He has the freaking knee pads that stretch all the way down. It almost looks like boots. That's very trendy for a lot of the guys who wrestled in the independent circuit, like ROH guys. Like, that's the AJ Styles look, Samoa Joe, Kenta, guys like that. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, he has kind of like a snarky attitude. He's not really about swearing too much. He doesn't cuss a lot. He doesn't use swear words. He's not about that. I mean, honestly, if there's a wrestler that I would compare him a little bit closer to, it would probably be like Raven. You know, I think Raven and CM Punk they have much more in common. Especially early CM Punk back in the day when I believe they were in the same stable or something in TNA. But I'm not sure about that. But like I said, I mean, Raven, I think, is more comparable to CM Punk and vice versa in terms of mic skills and presence. There's sort of this indie, long-haired, grungy-looking kid that kind of is a very good wrestler and, you know, underappreciated to a certain extent. And obviously, Raven has a different style too. He has different moves and everything, and he has a different promo style. But they're kind of similar. Like, I would say they're a lot closer than, let's say, Austin and CM Punk. I think the main reason why people compare CM Punk to Austin so much is because CM Punk was influenced by Austin. Like, he grew up on his stuff, and you know, there's that photo where you have a young CM Punk and Stone Cold in his prime back in the 90s. You know, so it's kind of like, oh, well, look at these two. And now CM Punk's at the top of the WWE now, so it's like 10 years later or whatever, you know, 12, 13 years later. Now you have this parallel. Well, it's not really the same. I can't see it as the same. I mean, you might as well compare John Cena to The Rock, you know, and it's not even that comparable either. Like, The Rock and John Cena are different characters. And that's, you know, let's not even get into, like, the movesets and the finishing moves. They have different attacks and moves and signature maneuvers. I mean, Austin, again, he was more of a brawler. Like, he would just snap his stunner out of nowhere. He would attack, he would just brawl and pound your face in with his fists, and the Thez press. You know, he was just more of that. Very psychological wrestler. He gets in your head, and there's a lot of taunting, and he is just very, very aggressive. CM Punk, I would say, is a lot more methodical. He's a lot more of a submission slash kind of a, I don't want to say strong style, but there's definitely that influence, the kick especially, you know, those kind of kicks to the chest and the kick to the head and the combination punches and the strikes to the head. And there's a lot more of a Japanese influence in CM Punk's moveset. You know, there's a bit more of that, you know, ROH feel to his character. I mean, even his finishing move, the go to sleep, that's from Kenta, a wrestler from Japan. He took that from Kenta's, you know, finishing move. I think there's no comparison between the finishing moves. I prefer Stone Cold Stunner any time, any day. I mean, hands down, one of the best finishing moves is the Stone Cold Stunner. It can come out of nowhere and it can hit you with it. And every time he does it, the crowd would pop. They would just go insane because you know it was the end. It was almost like a middle finger, you know, to the face of the opponent. Like, he would be involved in these amazing funny segments or these incredibly hyped segments, especially with Vince McMahon, and then he would cap it off with the Stone Cold Stunner. That was sort of like the icing on the cake on a lot of these segments. That would kind of be like, it was like the exclamation point. Like, you know, the meat of Stone Cold was the actual segment itself. His interaction with his foil characters. Vince McMahon as the foil, or The Rock as the foil, and Austin would go over. I guess in that regard, maybe you can criticize Austin for being very gimmick-driven, as opposed to just putting himself over. He has to rely on these crazy, wacky gimmicks, like driving a truck to the ring and spraying the people in the ring with beer and things like that, or throwing the belt over the frickin' bridge. With CM Punk has to rely more on his mic skills, and because it's a different era where everybody is kind of like shooting and there's sort of the smart mark crowd thing, he can placate to that, the smart mark audience, which is what he did last year with that amazing promo, that work shoot promo. And his so-called like pipe bombs, he would drop these here and there, and he would come across as this guy who's like, wow, this guy's speaking the truth. He's so edgy, but in a different way. In a very PG, very kind of reality show kind of way. Whereas I think Austin was more of a Crash TV personality. Like, wow, you don't know what he's gonna do today. Whoa, you don't know what you're gonna get with Austin. All kind of chaos and mayhem. With CM Punk, it's more like reality. Whoa, 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 he's telling the truth. Whoa. Overall, honestly, if I had to pick between the two, I think Austin is a lot more important than CM Punk. He got over way more. He was in a different era where everything was just bigger, more hyped up, and more exciting. If you really want to compare the two, it's basically the Attitude Era versus the PG era, and the best of both worlds. CM Punk was the best of his PG era, but it's still the PG era. There's still a lot of things that's kind of downgraded, kind of not as good as it can be. Alright, so that's it for this episode of Review Space. Thank you for watching. Until next time, ciao.